Hashtag please, I just need a job. No one wants to hire this poor, orphaned alien mother, except one Earthling. Rain lashed against the grimy windows of Earth's industrial outskirts, the neon signs reflecting in puddles of murky water. Lyra pulled her weathered coat tighter around herself and her daughter, Alara, whose tiny frame shivered against her chest. The rain seeped through the thin fabric, but it was all the protection they had against Earth's harsh elements, so different from the controlled climate of Xylos. "It's okay, little one," Lyra whispered, her voice carrying the melodic undertones characteristic of Xylosians, a sound that had earned her suspicious glances since arriving on this planet. "We'll find shelter soon." Alara whimpered softly, her silvery eyes, so like her father's, blinking up at Lyra with a trust that broke her heart. How could she tell her daughter that this was the 14th place they'd tried today? That no one wanted to hire an alien widow with no papers and a child clinging to her? The industrial zone stretched before them, a labyrinth of warehouses, scrap yards, and small manufacturing units. Most were shuttered for the night, but a faint light caught Lyra's attention. A small mechanical shop at the end of an alley, its sign half broken but still illuminated, Kale's Repairs. Desperation pushed her forward. Just one more try before finding somewhere to shelter for the night. One more door to knock on. The workshop was cluttered but organized in its chaos. Tools lined the walls, parts were categorized in clear bins, and in the center of it all stood a middle-aged man hunched over what appeared to be an engine block. He didn't look up as the bell above the door announced her entry. "We're closed," he said, his voice gruff, still focused on the machinery before him. "Please," Lyra said, the word catching in her throat. "I'm looking for work." The man, Kale, she presumed, finally looked up. His eyes widened slightly at her appearance. The faint luminescence of her skin, the elongated features common to Xylosians, and the small ridges along her temples. His gaze shifted to the bundle in her arms where Alara had begun to stir, revealing her own distinct alien features. "Not hiring," he said, returning to his work. But there was a hesitation in his voice, not the immediate hostility she'd faced elsewhere. "I can clean," Lyra pressed on, stepping further into the shop. "Organize. I'll learn quickly. I need—" Her voice broke, pride warring with necessity. "My daughter needs food." Kale's hands stilled on the engine. Without looking up, he asked, "You one of those refugees from the Outer Rim settlement?" Lyra tensed. The Outer Rim was where most legal alien immigrants lived, those with proper documents and registered status. "No," she admitted. "I have no papers, but I'm willing to work. Any job, any wage." Alara chose that moment to let out a weak cry, her tiny hands reaching out from the bundle. Kale's eyes darted to the child, and something in his expression shifted. "How old?" "She's just turned 2 Earth years," Lyra replied, gently rocking Alara. She hasn't eaten properly in days." Kale set down his tools with deliberate care and wiped his hands on a rag. He was a sturdy man, probably in his 40s, with weathered skin and dark hair streaked with premature gray. His face was hard to read, composed of angles and lines that spoke of a life not easily lived. "I don't need help," he said firmly. Then, after a beat, "But I've got a storage room in the back. It's got a cot. You can stay there tonight. There's a sink and a hot plate. I might have some soup." Relief washed over Lyra so intensely that she felt her knees weaken. "Thank you," she whispered. "I can work for it. I'll clean your shop, organize your inventory. Tomorrow." Kale cut her off, already turning away. "Get your kid fed and rested first. And don't touch anything in the shop without asking." "Of course I wouldn't. And this is temporary," he added, his back to her as he led the way to the storage room. "Just until you find something else. I don't need complications." The storage room was small but clean, with a narrow cot against one wall and a small sink in the corner. A hot plate sat on a shelf alongside a few canned goods. It wasn't much, but to Lyra, it was salvation. "Thank you," she said again, unable to express the depth of her gratitude. Kale merely nodded, handed her a can of soup and a clean pot, and retreated back to his work, closing the door behind him. Lyra stood in the middle of the tiny room, holding Alara close, allowing herself one moment of relief before the tears came. "We have shelter tonight," she whispered to her daughter. "And food. It's a start." As Alara finally slept, her small body curled against Lyra on the narrow cot. Lyra stared at the ceiling. The sounds of Kale working in the shop had stopped hours ago. In the silence, memories crept in like shadows. She remembered Terrace, her husband, his brilliant mind and gentle hands. The way he'd marveled at Alara when she was born, counting her tiny fingers in wonder. He'd been one of Xylos's most promising research scientists, working on renewable energy technologies that could benefit multiple worlds. Then came the military interest in his work, the pressure to weaponize his research, his refusal, the threats. Lyra squeezed her eyes shut against the images that followed. Their home in flames, Terrace pushing her toward the escape pod, thrusting their emergency documents into her hands. "Take Alara and run," he had said, his eyes burning with desperation. "I'll find you when it's safe." But he never had. And the emergency papers had proven worthless when the immigration authorities questioned their authenticity. Without Terrace's credentials or proof of his death, Lyra was just another undocumented alien trying to enter Earth illegally. Sleep finally claimed her, but it brought no peace. In her dreams, she was running again. Alara clutched her chest, the sound of pursuit close behind. Morning came with the clatter of tools and the hum of machinery. Lyra woke, disoriented, then remembered where they were. Alara was already awake, her silver eyes blinking curiously at their surroundings. "Good morning, little star," Lyra murmured, kissing her daughter's forehead. "Let's get you something to eat." She found 2 more cans in the small cupboard, beans and fruit, and warmed them on the hot plate. After feeding Alara and cleaning them both up as best she could with the small sink, she straightened her clothes and prepared to face their reluctant host. Kale was already deep in work when they emerged, surrounded by what looked like the dismantled parts of a hover transport. He glanced up briefly, nodded toward a small table in the corner where a pot of what humans called coffee sat alongside a wrapped package. "There's bread and some protein paste," he said, turning back to his work. "Not sure what your kind eats." "This is more than generous," Lyra replied, guiding Alara to the table. "My kind can eat most Earth foods. We're adaptable." Kale grunted in acknowledgement, but said nothing more. As they ate, Lyra observed the workshop in daylight. It was larger than it had appeared last night, with sections for different types of repairs, mechanical, electrical, and even some alien tech she recognized from trading outposts. The organization was functional, but could be improved. Perfect for demonstrating her value. "I'd like to start earning my keep," she said when they'd finished eating. "What would be most helpful?" Kale looked up, seeming almost surprised that she was still there. "Look, I told you I don't need." "Please," Lyra interrupted, standing straighter. "I'm not looking for charity. Just a chance. One day of work. If I'm not useful, we'll be gone tomorrow." Something like respect flickered across his face. He gestured to the cluttered workbenches and shelves. "Fine. Start by organizing the micro tools and the component drawers. Don't mix up the hover parts with the ground transport parts. And keep your kid from touching anything dangerous." Lyra nodded, already assessing the task. "Alara is well-behaved. She won't be a problem." Kale returned to his work, and Lyra set Alara up in a corner with a few safe items to play with. Some clean rags she twisted into doll shapes and an empty component box. Then she began sorting and organizing with methodical precision. Hours passed in relative silence, broken only by the sounds of work and occasional instructions from Kale. Lyra moved efficiently, her natural Xylosian dexterity allowing her to handle small components with ease. She recognized most of the Earth technology from her studies before coming to the planet, and the alien tech was largely familiar. By midday, she had reorganized 3 workbenches and cataloged an entire wall of components. Kale said nothing, but she caught him glancing at her work, his eyebrows raising slightly at the improvement. When she reached a section of more complex alien technology, she paused, studying a partially dismantled device. "This is a Peridian atmosphere converter," she said. "But you've got the frequency modulator connected to the wrong circuit." Kale looked up sharply. What do you know about Peridian tech? My husband was a scientist, she said simply. I assisted in his labs sometimes. She didn't mention that she held her own advanced degree in applied xenotechnology. It seemed irrelevant to their current arrangement. Kale approached, examining her work and then the converter. Show me. Lyra carefully disconnected the modulator and reattached it to its proper circuit. The Peridians build redundancies into everything. This secondary pathway increases efficiency by 18%. Kale watched her hands work with unveiled interest. When she finished, he tested the device. It hummed to life, functioning perfectly. Was all, he said, but he didn't object when she moved on to other alien devices that had clearly been set aside as too difficult to repair. By evening, Lyra had reorganized most of the shop's inventory and repaired 3 devices that Kale had been struggling with. Alara had remained content with her makeshift toys, occasionally watching her mother work with intelligent curiosity. Kale closed up the shop at sunset, locking the front door and pulling down the security shutters. He'd spoken little throughout the day, but now he turned to Lyra with an evaluating gaze. You know your way around tech, he said finally. Better than most humans I've hired. Thank you, Lyra replied, gathering Alara into her arms. The child was drowsy, her head lolling against her mother's shoulder. There's a shower in the back, behind the storage room, Kale said abruptly. Hot water works most days. And I've got some leftover protein packs in the cooler. Not exactly a gourmet meal, but it's better than can soup again. It was as close to an invitation to stay as Lyra expected to get. Thank you, she said again. For today. For everything. Kale nodded awkwardly. Tomorrow we got a client bringing in a busted NAV system from a Centaurian shuttle. Thought you might help with that. I'd be happy to, Lyra replied, careful to keep her voice neutral despite the surge of hope in her chest. Later, after she'd bathed Alara and herself in the small shower stall with its temperamental water heater, after they'd eaten the surprisingly decent meal Kale had provided, Lyra sat on the edge of the cot, watching her daughter sleep. We might have found a place, little star, she whispered, smoothing Alara's silvery blue hair away from her face. Just for a while. Just until we figure out our next step. But as she lay down beside her daughter, sleep eluded her. In the quiet darkness, she felt the weight of everything she'd lost and everything she still stood to lose. What if the authorities found them? What if whoever had targeted Terrace tracked them to Earth? What if Kale discovered who they really were and turned them in? It was in these quiet moments that grief threatened to overwhelm her. Not just for Terrace, but for their life on Xylos, for the future they'd planned together, for the world Alara should have grown up in. A sob built in her throat, but she swallowed it down. She couldn't afford a break. Not now. Not ever. Instead, she focused on her breathing, on the warm weight of her daughter beside her, on the unexpected kindness of a gruff Earthman who had no reason to help them but did anyway. Small mercies in a universe that had shown them precious few. Tomorrow would be another day of survival. One of many to come. Days turned into weeks with surprising ease. Each morning, Lyra and Alara would wake early. Lyra would prepare a simple breakfast, tidy their small room, and then join Kale in the workshop while Alara played in her increasingly elaborate corner, now equipped with actual toys, cast-offs that Kale had wordlessly brought in one day, claiming they were just junk from the back room. Lyra proved her worth many times over. Her knowledge of alien technology made her invaluable for the more exotic repairs that occasionally came through the shop. Word began to spread among the non-human residents of the industrial zone that Kale's repairs could now handle Centaurian, Peridian, and even rare Xylosian tech. Though Lyra was careful to downplay her expertise in the latter, claiming she'd merely encountered it before. Kale remained reserved, but the initial tension between them had eased into a comfortable working relationship. He was a man of few words and fewer questions, a quality Lyra deeply appreciated. He never asked about her past, about Alara's father, or about how they'd ended up alone and undocumented on Earth. In return, she respected his privacy, never inquiring about the photographs she'd glimpsed in his small apartment above the shop, or why a man with his technical skills was running a repair shop in the industrial outskirts rather than working for one of the major tech corporations. But there were moments, small, quiet moments, when the barriers between them thinned. When Cale would explain an Earth custom or technology to her with unexpected patience. When he would slip Alara an extra sweet from his own meager supply. When Lyra would catch him watching them with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. Something between longing and fear. One evening, as they were closing up the shop, Alara knocked over a container of small parts. They scattered across the floor, and Lyra rushed to collect them, apologizing profusely. "It's fine," Cale said, kneeling to help. "No harm done." As they gathered the tiny components, Alara joined them, her small hands carefully picking up pieces and placing them in the container. Her movements were precise, methodical, unusual for a child her age. "She's very coordinated," Cale observed. "Smart, too." "Yes," Lyra agreed softly. Like her father. It was the first time she'd mentioned Terrace, even indirectly. Cale glanced at her, then back at Alara. "What happened to him?" he asked, his voice neutral, giving her the space to decline to answer. Lyra hesitated. "He died," she said simply, "before we came to Earth." Cale nodded, accepting this limited truth without pressing further. "My wife died too," he said after a moment, surprising her. 7 years ago. Cancer. "I'm sorry," Lyra said, meaning it. Loss was loss, regardless of species. "Yeah." Cale cleared his throat. "There was a daughter too. She'd be about 12 now." Lyra's hand stilled. She lives with her grandparents. "My in-laws." His voice was carefully controlled. "They had resources I didn't. Better schools. Stability. You don't see her? Twice a year. Her birthday and Christmas." He picked up a last component and dropped it into the container. "It's better this way." Before Lyra could respond, a shadow passed by the shop window, deliberate, slow, observing. Cale noticed her sudden tension and followed her gaze. "Probably just a potential customer," he said, but he moved to the window and looked out carefully. The street was empty now. See? Nothing to worry about. But that night, sleep evaded Lyra again. The shadow at the window had awakened her constant, low-grade fear. In the 2 months they'd been at Cale's shop, she'd allowed herself to relax, just slightly. Now she lay awake, listening to every creak and whisper of the old building, every distant sound from the street outside. When she finally drifted off, the nightmares returned with renewed intensity. She was back on Xylos, running through the burning research facility. Terrace was ahead of her, calling her name, but no matter how fast she ran, she couldn't reach him. Then the scene shifted, and she was in a sterile room, officials in uniform surrounding her, taking Alara from her arms while a cold voice announced, "Undocumented aliens are subject to immediate deportation." She woke with a gasp, sweat-soaked and trembling. Alara slept peacefully beside her, unaware of her mother's distress. Lyra forced herself to breathe deeply, to push back against the panic threatening to overwhelm her. It was just a dream, she whispered to herself. Just a dream. But she knew better. Dreams were just manifestations of very real dangers. And somewhere out there, those dangers were circling closer. The next day brought an unexpected development. A client arrived at the shop, unusual in itself, as most business came through digital channels these days, asking specifically for the Xylosian technician. Cale intercepted the man at the front counter. "Don't know what you're talking about," he said gruffly. "I'm the only tech here." The man, human, expensively dressed, with a confident air of corporate money, smiled thinly. "Come now, mister. Cale, we all know you've been harboring an undocumented Xylosian. Word gets around, especially when someone starts repairing Peridian and Centaurian tech with surprising expertise." Lyra, who had been working in the back of the shop, felt her blood freeze. She glanced at Alara, playing quietly in her corner, and began calculating escape routes. "Like I said," Cale repeated, his voice harder now, "I'm the only tech here. Now, did you have something that needs fixing, or are you just here to waste my time?" The man placed a sleek business card on the counter. "My employer would like to offer your associate a legitimate employment opportunity. With papers, legal status, a real salary." He paused meaningfully. "Security," Kale didn't touch the card. And who exactly is your employer? Nexus Technologies. We specialize in adopting and adapting off-world tech for Earth markets. Someone with native knowledge of Xylosian technology would be invaluable. Even from where she stood, Lyra could see Kale's shoulders tense. Nexus Technologies was one of the largest tech conglomerates on Earth, known for their aggressive acquisition of alien intellectual property and equally aggressive corporate security forces. They operated in a gray area of international and interplanetary law, technically legal, but with methods that often strayed into questionable territory. Not interested, Kale said flatly. Now, unless you've got something that needs repairing, I'll leave the card, the man interrupted smoothly. In case your associate would like to make her own decision. The offer includes provisions for any dependents as well. His gaze drifted toward the back of the shop, as if he could see through walls to where Alara played. Children, for instance. Kale's hand moved to the pry bar that always sat beneath the counter, a movement so subtle that only someone watching for it would notice. We're done here, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. The man smiled again, turned, and left without another word. As soon as the door closed behind him, Kale locked it and flipped the sign to closed. Lyra emerged from the back, her face pale. I should go, she said immediately. They know we're here. They'll come back, or worse, report us to the authorities. Slow down, Kale said, though his own expression was grim. Let's think this through. There's nothing to think about. They found us. It's only a matter of time before. Before what? Kale interrupted. Who exactly are you running from, Lyra? Because that didn't sound like someone hunting you down. That sounded like a job offer. Lyra looked away, conflict evident in her expression. It's complicated. Yeah, I figured that much, Kale said dryly. Look, I'm not asking for your life story. But if there's danger coming to my shop, to you and Alara, I need to know what we're dealing with. The we wasn't lost on Lyra. Despite his gruff exterior, Kale had gradually, perhaps unconsciously, taken on their problems as his own. It was touching and terrifying. The last person who had stood beside her against the storm had died for it. Nexus Technologies is dangerous, she said finally. They don't just adapt alien technology, they steal it. And they don't care who gets hurt in the process. How do you know that? Lyra hesitated, then took a deep breath. Because my husband worked for their Xylosian equivalent. Terrace was developing clean energy technology, something that could have benefited everyone. But then the military got involved, and soon after, so did corporate interests. They wanted to weaponize his research. Understanding dawned in Kale's eyes. And he refused. He refused, Lyra confirmed, her voice barely above a whisper. And they killed him for it. Burned our research facility to the ground. We barely escaped with our lives. And now they're after you, because of what I know, what Terrace knew. She glanced at Alara, who had wandered over and was now clinging to her leg, sensing her mother's distress. And because of what Alara might one day know. Kale frowned. What do you mean? Xylosians pass knowledge genetically, Lyra explained, stroking Alara's silvery blue hair. Not complete knowledge. It has to be developed, trained. But the foundations, the instinctive understanding of certain principles, those are inherited. Alara carries her father's genius in her DNA. And these Nexus people know that. If they've done their research on Xylosians, yes. It would explain why they mentioned provisions for dependents. She looked up at Kale, her fear naked in her eyes. They don't want me for my technical skills. They want me because I'm the key to Alara. And they want Alara because she's the key to Terrace's research. Kale was silent for a long moment, absorbing this information. Then he moved to the window, peering out at the street before drawing the blinds. We need to get you somewhere safer, he said finally. No, Lyra shook her head firmly. We've imposed on you enough. This is our problem, not yours. Don't be stupid, Kale said, but there was no heat in his words. Where would you go? Back to the streets? How long would you last out there with corporate goons looking for you? I managed before I found your shop, Lyra pointed out. Yeah, and you showed up at my door half-starved with a sick kid. Kale ran a hand through his graying hair. Look, I know a place. A friend of mine owns a cabin in the mountains. Remote. Off the grid. We can lie low there until we figure out a more permanent solution. We, Lyra repeated, her voice small. Cale met her gaze evenly. Like it or not, I'm involved now. Besides, he added with a ghost of a smile, who's going to fix the generator when it breaks down? You. Despite everything, Lyra found herself smiling back. I did rebuild a Peridian atmospheric converter last week. Show off, Cale muttered, but the tension in the room had eased slightly. Pack whatever you need. We'll leave tonight after dark. As Lyra gathered their few possessions, she felt a complex mixture of emotions. Fear, certainly, but also a strange sense of relief. The constant pretense, the careful hiding of her knowledge and abilities had been exhausting. And underneath it all, a warm current of gratitude toward this solitary Earthman who had no obligation to help them, but chose to anyway. Thank you, she said simply when they were ready to leave, Illyra half asleep in her arms. Cale shrugged uncomfortably. Don't thank me yet. We've still got to get out of the city without being spotted. They slipped out through the back entrance of the shop, into an alley that connected to a maze of service corridors running behind the industrial buildings. Cale had an old ground transport vehicle, practically an antique, running on actual combustible fuel rather than the modern hover technology, parked in a concealed garage 2 blocks away. No electronic signature, he explained as they settled into the vehicle, Illyra curled up on Lyra's lap in the passenger seat. Can't be tracked by standard methods. The journey out of the city was tense. Every set of headlights, every patrol vehicle they passed sent Lyra's heart racing. She held Illyra close, ready to run if necessary. But Cale's driving was confident, taking back roads and avoiding main thoroughfares with the ease of someone who'd made a study of remaining unnoticed. The industrial sprawl gradually gave way to suburbs, then to rural outskirts, and finally to the foothills of mountains that rose dark against the night sky. The roads became narrower, winding through forests that pressed close on either side. After nearly 3 hours of driving, Cale turned onto a barely visible track that tunneled deeper into the woods. Almost there, he said, breaking the long silence. You doing okay? Lyra nodded, though exhaustion pulled at her. Illyra had long since fallen asleep, her warm weight both comforting and concerning. What kind of life was this for a child? Always running, always hiding? The cabin, when they finally reached it, was small but sturdy, nestled in a clearing surrounded by towering trees. It had a weathered, well-used look that suggested frequent habitation, despite its remote location. My friend uses it for hunting, Cale explained as he unlocked the door. But not this time of year. We should be undisturbed. The interior was simple but comfortable. A main room with a stone fireplace and worn furniture, a small kitchen area, and 2 doors that presumably led to bedrooms. Cale moved through the space with familiarity, turning on battery-powered lamps and checking supplies. Power's from a generator out back, he said. Water's from a well. Bathroom's basic but functional. There's a radio for emergencies, but no other communications tech that could be traced. Lyra settled Illyra on a worn sofa, covering her with a blanket from their hastily packed belongings. The child didn't stir, exhausted from the stress and travel. This is very prepared, Lyra observed cautiously. Cale's expression closed slightly. I told you, it's a hunting cabin. But something in his tone suggested more than that. This wasn't just a friend's casual retreat. It was a deliberately isolated, self-sufficient safe house. The kind of place someone might maintain if they had experience with needing to disappear. Who are you, Cale? Lyra asked softly. Really? He busied himself with checking the kitchen supplies, his back to her. Nobody important. Just a guy with a repair shop. A guy with a repair shop who happens to have an untraceable vehicle and access to an off-grid cabin in the middle of nowhere. She approached him slowly. You've helped us at every turn. Put yourself at risk. What? Cale turned to face her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. Maybe I know what it's like to need help and not get it, he said finally. Maybe I know what it's like to lose everything. Lyra waited, sensing there was more. I wasn't always a repair shop owner, he continued after a moment. I used to work for one of the big tech corporations. Engineering division. Design propulsion systems for commercial transports. What happened? A shadow crossed his face. I discovered that my designs were being modified for military applications. Weapons platforms. Against the terms of my contract and against my personal ethics. Lyra felt a chill of recognition. You objected. I did more than object. I blew the whistle. Went public with proof. His laugh was hollow. Turns out corporations don't like that much. They came after you, Lyra guessed. They came after everything, Cale corrected. My career, my reputation, my finances. My marriage couldn't survive the stress. After Sarah died, her parents sued for custody of our daughter, claiming I was unstable, a conspiracy theorist. With no job, no home, and legal bills piling up, I lost. I'm so sorry, Lyra whispered, understanding now the pain she'd occasionally glimpsed beneath his gruff exterior. Cale shrugged, but the casual gesture couldn't disguise the old wound. So yeah, I know a thing or two about running. About starting over with nothing but what you can carry. Lyra reached out hesitantly, placing her hand on his arm. It was the first time they'd touched beyond the accidental contact of working alongside each other. Thank you for telling me. He looked down at her hand, then back at her face. For a moment, something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, understanding, perhaps something more. Then he stepped away, clearing his throat. You should get some rest, he said. Bedroom on the left has 2 beds. I'll take the one on the right. Lyra nodded, suddenly aware of how emotionally and physically drained she was. Good night, Cale. Good night, Lyra. In the small bedroom, she settled Alara on one of the twin beds and lay down beside her, too exhausted to even undress. Despite everything, the danger, the uncertainty, the abrupt upheaval, she felt strangely secure. For the first time since fleeing Xylos, she wasn't alone in her fight to protect Alara. As sleep claimed her, her last thought was of Cale, a man who had lost everything yet still found the courage to help others at risk to himself. Perhaps there was hope for them after all. The peaceful isolation of the cabin lasted 3 days. They fell into a simple routine, with Cale checking the perimeter and maintaining the generator, while Lyra managed the interior and prepared meals from the well-stocked pantry. Alara blossomed in the natural setting, exploring the clearing around the cabin with curious delight, collecting leaves and stones, and asking endless questions about Earth flora and fauna. In these quiet days, the relationship between Lyra and Cale deepened. Freed from the constant work of the repair shop and the ever-present tension of the city, they talked more openly. Lyra shared stories of Xylos, its crystalline cities, its binary suns, the cultural reverence for knowledge and art. Cale spoke of his earlier life, his daughter Myra's childhood, before illness and corporate vengeance tore his family apart. She's got your eyes, Cale said on the 3rd evening, watching Alara as she played with a puzzle he'd found in a cabinet. Same intensity, same curiosity. Terrace always said she had my determination, Lyra replied with a sad smile. He called it stubbornness. Smart man, Cale murmured, earning a mock glare from Lyra that dissolved into soft laughter. It was in that moment of unguarded warmth that they heard it, the distant but unmistakable sound of an approaching vehicle. The change was instantaneous. Cale moved to the window, carefully peering out without disturbing the curtain. Get your things, he said, his voice low and urgent. And get Alara. Lyra didn't waste time with questions. She gathered Alara and their small bag of possessions while Cale extinguished lights and checked his ancient but well-maintained projectile weapon, a relic from before energy weapons became standard. There's a cellar, he explained, moving a rug to reveal a trapdoor. Storm shelter. It connects to a tunnel that comes out about half a mile from here, near the stream. Follow it downstream until you reach a road. There's an emergency transmitter hidden in a hollow tree there. Activate it, and a friend of mine will come. Tell him I sent you. What about you? Lyra demanded, clutching Alara to her chest. I'll hold him off, Cale said simply. Buy you time. No. Lyra shook her head fiercely. We stay together. The sound of the vehicle grew louder, now accompanied by the distinctive whine of an energy scanner, the kind used by corporate security forces and law enforcement to detect life forms. Lyra. Kale's voice was firm but gentle as he placed his hands on her shoulders. This isn't a discussion. If they're who we think they are, they won't stop. They'll take Alara. You know that. Tears burned in Lyra's eyes, but she nodded. She knew he was right. Be careful, she whispered. Always am. His smile was tight, but genuine. He looked down at Alara, who was watching them with wide, frightened eyes. Hey, kiddo, you take care of your mom, all right? Alara nodded solemnly. Come with us, Kale. Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, regret, determination. I'll catch up, he promised, though they all knew it might not be true. Now go. Lyra descended into the cellar. Alara clutched tightly in her arms. The trapdoor closed above them, followed by the sound of the rug being replaced. In the darkness, Lyra activated the small light function on her wrist device, one of the few pieces of Xylosian technology she'd managed to keep. The cellar was small but well-equipped, with emergency supplies lining the walls. At the far end, a narrow tunnel led into darkness. Lyra took a deep breath, steeling herself. We need to be very quiet, little star, she whispered to Alara. Can you do that for me? Like when we play the hiding game. Alara nodded, her silver eyes luminous in the faint light. Is Kale in danger? She asked, her voice barely audible. Lyra swallowed hard. He's very brave and very smart. He'll be okay. She prayed it wasn't a lie. With one last glance at the trapdoor above them, Lyra entered the tunnel, moving as quickly as she dared while carrying Alara. The passage was narrow but tall enough for her to stand upright, reinforced with metal supports at regular intervals. It sloped gradually downward, following the natural contour of the land toward the stream Kale had mentioned. Above them, muffled by earth and distance, came the sounds of confrontation, voices, then the sharp crack of Kale's projectile weapon, followed by the higher-pitched whine of energy weapons. Lyra quickened her pace, fighting against the urge to turn back. The tunnel seemed endless, winding through the earth like the burrow of some enormous creature. Alara clung to her mother face, buried against her neck, trembling but silent as promised. Finally, after what seemed like hours but was probably no more than 20 minutes, Lyra felt a cool draft of air. The tunnel widened, then ended at a concealed exit camouflaged with a hinged panel of earth and roots. Emerging carefully, Lyra found herself in a small ravine. The promised stream gurgled nearby, its waters dark under the night sky. She oriented herself quickly. Downstream would be to the east, judging by the position of Earth's moon. Without hesitation, she began to follow the watercourse, staying within the cover of trees that lined its banks. Are they gone? Alara whispered after they'd been walking for some time. I think so, Lyra replied, though she had no way of knowing. We just need to find the road and the transmitter, and then we'll be safe. And Kale will find us. Lyra's throat tightened. I hope so, little star. The stream widened as they continued, eventually joining a larger river. The terrain grew more difficult, with rocky banks and denser vegetation. Lyra's arms ached from carrying Alara, but she dared not set her down. The ground was treacherous in the darkness, and speed was essential. A distant sound made her freeze, the distinctive hum of hover transport engines. They were being pursued, desperation lending her strength. Lyra pushed forward more rapidly, no longer worried about silence. The road, they just needed to reach the road and find the transmitter. When they finally stumbled onto the narrow dirt track that passed for a road in this remote area, Lyra nearly wept with relief. Now, they just needed to find a hollow tree, she murmured, scanning the forest edge. But which one? The sound of pursuit grew louder. They had minutes, perhaps less. There! Alara pointed suddenly. That one looks different. Following her daughter's gesture, Lyra spotted it. An ancient oak with a distinctive split in its trunk, creating a hollow large enough for a child to hide in. She ran to it, fingers frantically searching the cavity until they closed around a smooth, cylindrical object, the transmitter. It was a simple device, military-grade, but older technology. A single button activated it, sending out a coded signal on a frequency that would be recognized by whoever Kale's mysterious friend was. Lyra pressed it, holding it down for the requisite 3 seconds as the small light on its end blinked from red to green. "Now, what?" Alara asked, her voice small. "Now we wait," Lyra replied, pulling her daughter close. "And we hide." They retreated into the underbrush, finding a concealed spot beneath a fallen log that offered a view of the road while keeping them hidden. The hover engines grew louder, then suddenly cut off. Voices carried through the night. Human voices, speaking with the clipped precision of corporate security. "Spread out," one commanded. The scanner picked up non-human life signs in this vicinity. "Could be anything," another replied. "These woods are full of wildlife." "It's a Xylosian signature," the first voice said firmly. "The woman and the child. They're here somewhere." Lyra held Alara tighter, willing her not to make a sound. Her mind raced, calculating options. The transmitter had been activated, but who knew how long it would take for help to arrive? And what had happened to Kale? Had he escaped, or... She couldn't complete the thought. Couldn't bear to. Footsteps approached their hiding place. A beam of light swept the ground near them. Lyra pressed deeper into the shadows, one hand covering Alara's mouth. The light moved closer, then paused. "Got something here," called a voice much too close. Lyra tensed, preparing to run, even if they caught her, if Alara could get away. The night erupted in chaos. There was a blinding flash, followed by a concussive wave that made the ground shake. Shouts of alarm rang out. More flashes, accompanied by sounds Lyra recognized as stunner weapons. Non-lethal, but highly incapacitating. "Stay down," a voice bellowed from the darkness. 2 more flashes, then silence broken only by the groans of injured men. Footsteps approached again, but these were different, deliberate, confident. "Lyra," a voice called softly. "Alara? It's safe now." It wasn't Kale's voice. Lyra remained frozen, uncertain. "Kale sent me," the voice continued. "I'm Dr. Marcus Reeves. He's an old friend." Slowly, cautiously, Lyra emerged from hiding. Alara still clutched protectively in her arms. The man standing in the road was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark skin and close-cropped gray hair. He wore nondescript clothing that somehow suggested military background, and he held what appeared to be a high-end stunner weapon with practiced ease. "Where's Kale?" Lyra demanded. Dr. Reeves's expression softened with concern. "I don't know. His transmitter activated first, then yours. That's why I was able to get here so quickly. I was already en route. We have to go back for him," Lyra said immediately. "And we will," Reeves assured her. "But first, I need to get you and the child to safety. Then I can return with proper backup." "I'm not leaving him," Lyra insisted, even as her logical mind recognized the wisdom of Reeves's words. Alara needed protection first. "Your daughter needs you," Reeves said gently, echoing her thoughts. "And Kale would never forgive me if I let anything happen to either of you." He knew what he was doing, Lyra. The truth of this struck her painfully. Kale had chosen to stay behind, to sacrifice himself, if necessary, to give them a chance. Disrespecting that choice would render his sacrifice meaningless. "How long?" she asked, her voice breaking. "How long until we can go back for him?" "My team is already mobilizing," Reeves replied. 2 hours, maybe 3. "We'll find him, I promise." He gestured to a sleek, military-grade hover transport parked further down the road, its stealth systems explaining how he'd approached undetected. "Now please, we need to move. There will be more of them." With a heavy heart, Lyra followed him to the vehicle. As they lifted off, rising above the treetops, she looked back toward the distant cabin where Kale had made his stand. Somewhere in that darkness was the man who had saved them, who had become more important to them than she had ever expected. "He'll be okay," she whispered to Alara, who had finally succumbed to exhaustion and fallen asleep at her lap. "He has to be." Dr. Reeves's safe location turned out to be a former military research facility, long since decommissioned and converted to a private medical clinic specializing in non-human treatment. It was hidden in plain sight in a mid-sized city several hundred miles from Kale's cabin, its true purpose concealed behind the facade of an ordinary human hospital. We provide care for undocumented aliens who can't access the official system, Reeves explained as he led them through a secure entrance hidden in what appeared to be a supply closet. Among other services, your resistance, Lyra realized, against the corporations. Reeves smiled slightly. We prefer to think of ourselves as advocates for ethical technology development and xenocultural exchange. But yes, we work against corporate exploitation of alien knowledge and individuals. The hidden facility was impressive, clean, well-equipped, with a staff that included both humans and several alien species Lyra recognized. They were led to a comfortable suite where medical staff examined Alara, while Lyra anxiously looked on. She's undernourished, but otherwise healthy. The physician, a human woman with kind eyes, informed Lyra. Nothing some proper, Zelosian-compatible nutrition won't fix. The relief of hearing this was almost enough to distract Lyra from her worry about Kale. Almost. Any word? She asked when Reeves returned several hours later. His expression was grave. Our team reached the cabin. There had been a firefight, substantial damage to the structure, and signs of advanced energy weapons. Lyra's heart clenched. And Kale. Not there, Reeves said. There was blood, human blood, but no body. They took him, Lyra whispered, horror and guilt washing over her. Most likely, Reeves agreed. But that means he's alive, Lyra. And if he's alive, we can find him. How? Nexus Technologies is one of the largest corporations on Earth. They have facilities everywhere, private security forces, political connections. And we have friends in unexpected places, Reeves interrupted calmly, including inside Nexus itself. Not everyone who works for these companies agrees with their methods or ethics. Lyra wanted to believe him, but despair threatened to overwhelm her. This is my fault. If we hadn't come into his life. Stop, Reeves said firmly. Kale made his choices. He knew the risks. And from what I understand about your situation, Nexus would have found you eventually, with or without Kale's involvement. It was true, but it didn't ease the ache in her chest. In the short time they'd been together, Kale had become more than just a reluctant benefactor. He'd become family. What do we do now? She asked, gathering her strength. We gather intelligence. We make plans. And when the time is right, we act. Reeves regarded her thoughtfully. But first, you need a rest. Both of you. You're safe here for the moment. Use that time to recover your strength. Lyra knew he was right, but sleep seemed impossible. After Alara had been settled in a comfortable bed, finally receiving the nutrition and care she needed, Lyra sat by the window of their suite, staring out at the city lights. I won't abandon you, she whispered, as if Kale could somehow hear her. Just hold on. Days passed in an agonizing blend of waiting and preparation. Reeves's organization, which he referred to simply as the network, was impressively effective. Within 48 hours, they had confirmed that Kale was being held at a Nexus research facility outside the city, alive but under heavy security. The corporation clearly believed he knew where Lyra and Alara were, and were attempting to extract that information. He won't tell them, Lyra said with certainty when Reeves shared this intelligence. No matter what they do to him. I know, Reeves replied grimly. That's why we need to move quickly. The plan came together over the next day. A precision extraction operation using the network's resources and Lyra's unique knowledge. Alara would remain at the facility under protection, while Lyra would accompany the rescue team. I should be the one to go in, she insisted during the planning session. I have technical knowledge that could bypass their security systems. And, she hesitated, and I need to be there. For him. Reeves studied her for a long moment before nodding. All right, but you follow orders, understand? No heroics. The night of the operation arrived with tense anticipation. Lyra kissed Alara goodbye, promising to return with Kale, then joined the team in their transport. The group was small but clearly experienced, 4 humans with military bearing and 1 Centaurian technical specialist. Nexus won't expect us to hit them directly, Reeves explained during the flight. They think they've won. That arrogance is our advantage. The Nexus facility loomed ahead, a sprawling complex of gleaming buildings surrounded by a high perimeter wall. As they approached, the Centaurian activated a sophisticated cloaking device that rendered their transport invisible to standard sensors. Remember, Reeves reminded them as they prepared to disembark. This is extraction only. We get Kale and we leave. No prolonged engagement. Lyra nodded, adjusting the protective gear they provided her. Her heart pounded with fear and determination. Kale had risked everything for her and Alara. Now was her turn. The infiltration went smoother than expected, with the Centaurians' tech disabling perimeter sensors while Lyra used her knowledge of corporate security protocols to bypass the internal systems. They moved through the facility like ghosts, stunning the few guards they encountered without raising alarms. According to their intelligence, Kale was being held in a high-security section of the research wing. As they approached, Lyra's anxiety grew. What condition would he be in? Had they hurt him? Tortured him? The door to the detention area required advanced biometric authentication, but Lyra had anticipated this. Using a device of her own design, hastily constructed from components the network had provided, she interfaced with the security panel. Xylosian technology had always been more advanced than Earth's, and she'd learned from the best. The door slid open. Inside, a single guard looked up in shock, reaching for his weapon, but one of the team members stunned him before he could raise the alarm. And there, in a cell at the far end of the room, was Kale. He was strapped to an examination table, connected to various monitoring devices. His face was bruised, and there was a bandage on his left shoulder, stained with blood. But his eyes were open, alert, defiant, even in captivity. Those eyes widened when they fell on Lyra. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped as she rushed to him, frantically working to disconnect the restraints and monitoring equipment. "Shut up," she replied, tears blurring her vision. "Did you really think I'd leave you behind?" Despite everything, a ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Stubborn," he murmured. "Determined," she corrected, echoing their earlier conversation. With the team's help, they got Kale on his feet. He was weak, but able to walk with support. As they made their way back through the facility, Reeves at point and the rest of the team forming a protective formation around them. Lyra kept close to Kale's side. "Alara," he asked between labored breaths. "Safe," Lyra assured him. "Waiting for us." "Good." He stumbled slightly, and she tightened her grip around his waist. "Lyra, they know. About Alara. About what she carries." Cold fear washed over her. "Ow! Someone from Xylos. Working for them." He grimaced in pain. "A scientist. Worked with Terrace." Before Lyra could process this disturbing news, alarms began to blare throughout the facility. Their presence had been discovered. "Move," Reeves ordered, leading them down a different corridor than the one they'd used to enter. Contingency route. They ran, half carrying Kale between them, as security forces began to converge on their location. Energy weapons fire erupted behind them, scoring the walls as they ducked around a corner. "The transport is rerouting to extraction point B," the Centaurian technician reported, checking a wrist device. 3 minutes. "We need to hold this position until then," Reeves decided, taking up a defensive stance at the corridor junction. "Lyra, keep Kale moving toward the north exit. We'll cover you." Lyra hesitated, reluctant to leave them. "Go," Reeves insisted. "Get him out of here." With a nod of gratitude, Lyra guided Kale down the indicated corridor, supporting his weight as best she could. Behind them, the sounds of weapon fire intensified. "Left." At the next junction, Kale managed to say between pain breaths, "Maintenance access leads directly to the exterior." "How do you know that?" Lyra asked, surprised. "Studied facility schematics while they thought I was unconscious," he replied with a weak grin that was so fundamentally Kale that it made her heart clench. The maintenance access was exactly where he'd indicated, and it indeed led them to a service exit on the north side of the complex. Outside, the night air was cool against their skin as they emerged onto a loading area, currently deserted due to the security alert drawing personnel elsewhere. "There," Kale pointed weakly to a shadowed area near the perimeter wall. "Transport should be able to reach us there." As they made their way across the open space, a figure stepped out from behind a parked ground vehicle, blocking their path. In the dim light, Lyra could make out a humanoid silhouette, but not human. The distinctive temple ridges and luminescent eyes were unmistakably Xylosian. "Hello, Lyra," the figure said in their native tongue. "It's been a long time." Lyra froze, recognition washing over her like ice water. "Marin." The Xylosian scientist stepped forward, his expression a mixture of sadness and determination. "You shouldn't have run. You know how important Alara is to our work." "Your work?" Lyra spat. "You mean the weapons you wanted to create from Terrace's research? The technology that was meant to help people, not destroy them?" Terrace was naive, Marin replied coldly. "As are you. The universe is dangerous, Lyra. Our people need protection. And how many will die for that protection?" She shifted, subtly positioning herself between Marin and Kale. "Terrace gave his life to prevent his work from being weaponized. I won't dishonor that sacrifice." Marin sighed. "Where's the child, Lyra? Tell me that at least. She belongs with her own kind." "She's safe from you," Lyra replied, acutely aware of Kale's weakening condition beside her. They needed to end this confrontation quickly. "I was there, you know," Marin said suddenly. "The night of the fire. The night Terrace died." Lyra felt as if the ground had dropped from beneath her feet. "What?" He wouldn't listen to reason. Marin's voice was matter-of-fact, empty of remorse. He was going to destroy all his research. Years of work lost forever. "I couldn't allow that." "You." Lyra couldn't form the words, horror and rage choking her. "You killed him. You killed Terrace." Marin spread his hands in a gesture of cold pragmatism. "His research lives on. In you. In Alara." Something inside Lyra broke and reformed in that moment, grief crystallizing into a blade-sharp resolve. This was the truth she'd been running from. Not just faceless corporate interests, but betrayal from within. From someone Terrace had trusted. "I call friend." "You'll never have Alara," she said, her voice deadly calm. "And you'll answer for what you've done." Marin's expression hardened. "Don't be foolish, Lyra. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and your human pet is barely standing. Come with me now. Bring me to Alara, and I'll ensure you're both treated well." She said no. Kale spoke up, his voice weak but determined as he straightened beside her, summoning his remaining strength. Marin regarded him with contempt. "This doesn't concern you, human." "That's where you're wrong," Kale replied. "It concerns both of us. Lyra and Alara are my family now." Family. The word resonated within Lyra with unexpected power. Yes, that was it exactly. Somewhere between reluctant charity and desperate flight, they had become a family. Unlikely, unplanned, but no less real for it. Marin's hand moved to a weapon at his side. "I won't ask again. Where's the child?" Before either could respond, the night was split by the distinctive whine of a transport's engines. The network's vehicle descended rapidly, hovering just above the loading area, its side door sliding open to reveal Reeves and the remaining team members, weapons trained on Marin. "Step back from them," Reeves commanded. Marin assessed the situation with calculating eyes, clearly recognizing he was outmatched. "This isn't over, Lyra," he said, slowly raising his hands. "Nexus is just one corporation among many, and I am just one scientist among many who understand the value of what Alara carries." "Perhaps," Lyra replied as Kale's arm tightened around her shoulders. "But now I understand exactly what we're facing. And who?" "You've lost your advantage, Marin." With Marin covered by the team's weapons, Lyra helped Kale into the transport. As they lifted off, leaving the Nexus facility and Marin behind, she allowed herself to finally breathe. "I'd say that went pretty well," Kale murmured, slumping against her as the adrenaline drained from his system, leaving pain and exhaustion in its wake. Lyra gave a shocked laugh that was half-sob. "You and I have very different definitions of well." His hand found hers in the darkness of the transport bay. "We're alive. We're together. Alara's safe." His fingers tightened around hers. "That's all that matters." And despite everything, the dangers still pursuing them, the revelations about Marin's betrayal, the uncertain future ahead, Lyra found herself agreeing. That was indeed all that mattered. The reunion with Alara at the network's facility was emotional for all of them. The child launched herself at Kale with a cry of joy, heedless of his injuries, and he caught her with his good arm, holding her close despite the pain it clearly caused him. "You came back," Alara said, her silver eyes wide with wonder and relief. "Of course I did, kiddo," Kale replied, his gruff voice gentler than Lyra had ever heard it. "I promised, didn't I?" Over the following days, as Kale recovered under the careful attention of the network's medical staff, Lyra related everything they had learned about Marin's betrayal and the true circumstances of Terrace's death. "So now we know who we're really running from," she concluded, sitting beside Kale's bed while Alara napped in a chair nearby. "And what they're capable of. Knowledge is power," Kale said, wincing slightly as he shifted position. "Now we can plan better." "Plan for what?" Lyra asked. "We'll always be running. Marin will never stop hunting us. And even if something happened to him, there are others, corporations, governments, individuals, who would exploit Alara if they knew what she carries." Kale was quiet for a moment, thinking, maybe running isn't the answer anymore. "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe it's time to stop hiding and start fighting back," he said. "Not directly. We're not an army. But Reeves's network has resources, connections, and you have knowledge that could be valuable." "My knowledge of Terrace's research." Lyra shook her head. "That's what everyone wants. That's what got him killed." "No," Kale said patiently. "Your knowledge of how to protect it, of how to ensure it's used the way Terrace intended, to help people, not harm them." He took her hand. "You don't have to decide right now. We all need time to recover, to think." Lyra nodded, appreciating his understanding. "What about you? What do you want to do?" "Honestly," Kale glanced at the sleeping Alara, then back to Lyra. "I want to keep you both safe. I want—" He hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. "I want to stay with you. Both of you. If that's what you want too." The simple declaration sent warmth spreading through Lyra's chest. "Yes," she said softly. "That's what we want too." 2 weeks later, when Kale was strong enough to travel, Reeves presented them with a proposal. The network has a research facility in the mountains of what used to be called New Zealand, he explained, spreading a map on the table of their meeting room. "Remote, self-sufficient, with security systems that would make Nexus jealous. We conduct ethical research there, with alien collaborators who share our vision." "And you want us to go there?" Lyra asked. "I want to offer you sanctuary," Reeves corrected. "A place where Alara can grow up safely. Where you can continue your work, your husband's work, in the spirit he intended. And where Kale's engineering expertise wouldn't go to waste either." Kale and Lyra exchanged glances. "It sounds too good to be true," Kale said cautiously. "There are conditions," Reeves admitted. "The knowledge you possess is valuable, Lyra. The network would expect you to share it, on your terms, for ethical applications only. And there would still be risks. Marin and Nexus won't simply forget about you. But we'd have protection," Lyra pointed out. "Resources. A community." "Yes," Reeves nodded. "You would." Later, as they discussed the offer in private, Lyra found herself drawn to the possibility of stability, of purpose beyond mere survival. "What do you think?" she asked Kale, who had been unusually quiet. He looked up from where he'd been watching Alara play with some educational toys the network had provided. I think Terrace would want his work to help people. And I think you've been running long enough." Lyra corrected gently. "We've been running long enough." A slow smile spread across Kale's face. One of those rare, full expressions that transformed his usually stern features. "Yeah, we have." The decision made, they prepared for yet another journey. But this one felt different. This one had hope embedded in it. A destination that promised more than temporary shelter. On their last night at the network facility, after Alara had fallen asleep, Lyra and Kale sat together on a small balcony overlooking the city lights. "I never thought I'd find this again," Kale said quietly. "After Sarah died, after I lost Mira, I thought that was it for me. No more family, no more connections." He turned to look at her, his expression open and vulnerable in a way she'd rarely seen. "Then you showed up at my shop, asking for a job." "Just trying to survive," Lyra reminded him with a small smile. "We all are," Kale replied. "But sometimes survival isn't enough. Sometimes you need a reason to do more than just keep breathing." His hand found hers in the darkness. You and Alara gave me that. Lyra interlaced her fingers with his, the warmth of the contact spreading through her. And you gave us safety when no one else would. A chance when everything seemed hopeless. I'd say we're even then, Cale murmured, his eyes holding hers in the dim light. Not even close, Lyra replied softly. But we have time to work on that. The next morning, as they boarded the transport that would take them to their new home, Lyra held Alara with one arm and grasped Cale's hand with the other. Together, they stepped into the future, not running from danger, but moving toward possibility. An unlikely family bound by choice rather than blood. A mother who had crossed galaxies to protect her child. A man who had lost everything only to find a new purpose. And a child who carried within her both the legacy of her father's brilliance and the promise of a future where that brilliance might finally serve its intended purpose. To heal, to build, to connect. As the transport lifted off, leaving the city behind, Alara pointed excitedly at the blue sky opening up before them. Look, Mama. Look, Cale. We're flying. Yes, little star, Lyra replied, her heart full. We're flying together. Cale's arms slipped around her shoulders, solid and reassuring. Together, he echoed quietly. And in that moment, despite all they had endured and all that still lay ahead, Lyra knew with absolute certainty that they had found something most people, human or alien, spend their entire lives searching for, a place to belong. Not a physical location, but the space created between people who choose each other, who protect each other, who love each other despite every difference and against all odds. They had found home.